Hello and welcome everybody. I am so excited to have you all here today for the first in our 6-session series, Day 1 and Beyond, which will take you through a series of topics and activities related to building out on Oracle Cloud. For those of you who might be new to our events, we're hosted on Cloud Customer Connect, which is our Oracle community forums for end users. You'll see some links in the chat throughout the presentation today that lead you back to those CCC forums. And if you haven't already, we invite you to create a free account, join in discussions, look for upcoming events of all kinds of topics. My name is Kenna Ketrick. I'm a program manager with the OCI go-to-market team, and today I'm joined by Larry Beausoleil, Cloud Engineering Senior Enablement Manager, and Jeremy Walker, Master Principal Cloud Architect. And today they'll be focusing on OCI business operations and governance. Before I hand things over to them, though, I do have one quick poll that I would like to launch. Anyone who's joined us before might find this familiar. These OCI sessions that we run, both these fundamental series and the weekly Thursday deep dives, are designed with you, our users, in mind. So I always appreciate any feedback that you can give on what topics interest you the most, because I can use that then to plan out the next set of sessions. Speaking of upcoming sessions, we do have one on Thursday this week, Thursday, July 15th. Flavio Pereira will be joining us for a session on Terraform, which is going to be really good for newer users to Terraform. So it's will be taking you through how to prepare your account for Terraform, how to write your first file. So actually syncs pretty nicely with this fundamental series that we're kicking off today. I'll drop a link to that registration page in the chat, and I hope you can join us. I'm also going to drop a link to an OCI survey. Similarly, any opinions and feedback you have about our products and services are really helpful to us. We really appreciate you taking a couple minutes of your time to provide that feedback, if you could. And our usual reminders, please use that Q&A box down at the bottom at any point throughout the session to drop questions in there. We will have time for live Q&A, and that's always good to hear from you about what you're curious about. And we're also recording this, of course, so if you have colleagues that you think might be interested in this series, this will be posted as a recording, and then there will be other series coming up after this, so you can jump in at any point, and I'll drop links to where those will be as well. All right, I think that is quite enough from me. Go ahead and take it away, Larry.
Awesome. Thank you, Kenna. Thank you for the introduction, and welcome everybody to this program. So this is something that Kenna and I have talked about doing for a while now. So we just want to get everybody started with Oracle Cloud infrastructure, some of the basics. So like Kenna was saying, I'm Larry Beausoleil. I work at Oracle, been here a while, and my background is in cloud infrastructure. I've been doing this for a while now, a little over 10 years for cloud infrastructure and 13 plus years in industry for infrastructure and deployment. And I'm joined with Jeremy Walker. I'm going to let Jeremy introduce himself and a little bit of his background. And I'm going to go ahead and get the slide sharing while he's introducing himself.
Awesome. Thanks, Larry. Yeah, good morning, everyone. I want to thank everyone for joining. This is exciting for us. We're really excited about this series to introduce the fundamentals of OCI and speak about the new and improved feature set and the options and availability of what the opportunity you have running on OCI. My name is Jeremy Walker. I am a architect with Oracle, and I'm fairly new to Oracle, but not new to cloud. I have a background in infrastructure, both cloud and on-prem. And then farther back in the good old days as a software developer. So I have an applications and development view of infrastructure, of cloud in general. And so that led me to kind of a DevOps and infrastructure as code background and working closely with those tool sets. And that feeds well into what we're talking about today with operation and government. So I hope we'll get into that a bit later. We'll be putting up a poll right now for seeing what your background is. We'd like to just kind of see what you guys have been toying with, playing with, or if this is just new and a curiosity thing for you guys. We want to be able to speak to the questions that you have and also speak to the interest that brought you here. So yeah, it looks like you're seeing that. So it looks like we have a good plethora of answers across the board. So that's good. That's what we want to see. And hopefully we'll be able to introduce some new concepts and best practices across OCI and the way that it as a platform, as an infrastructure platform, not just the Oracle suite, can be helpful to you in your enterprise. I'll hand it back to Larry.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, this is going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to. It's exciting to see some of the experience levels here. So let's go ahead and dive right into kind of the business quick start. And this is going to cover some of the basic governance. And we're going to talk about some different topics. And like we said, feel free to ask questions. Like this time is for you to ask questions, put them in the Q&A. We'll get to them as soon as we can. And there's going to be subsequent questions that will be in the later series. So if it's something that we're going to dive into further in one of our follow-up series, we'll let you know at that time as well. So let me make sure I'm clicking the right spot. All right. So quick agenda. So what we want to talk about, we had our introductions, you got to know Jeremy a little bit, got to know myself a little bit and kind of the team that's supporting this. We're going to talk a little bit about security, identity and access management. I'm going to hop in and show you some stuff around IAM. Then we're going to get tongue tangled this morning. Going to get into cost and budget analysis. And then I'll talk a little bit about kind of the next steps. So when we progress through this, one of the things I want to do real quick for like a level setting of where we're at and what we're trying to do in our journey here is I want to start at what are the foundational items to get you up and running? And this is kind of why I wanted to bring Jeremy into this talk, because we just wanted to chat with everybody and explain like some of the best practices, some of the things that we've seen in our experience and our exposure over the years, because these are core topics when you talk about security. I know that this doesn't entirely fall into the core piece for the business teams, but this is something that security and these points, this cost and budgeting, they are crucial for every single account that you set up. And this doesn't matter at any vendor. These are crucial steps to make sure that you are getting off the ground correctly. So as we kind of progress forward, we're going to talk about, the fact that Oracle Cloud is a full stack solution. We have a lot to offer here to make sure that you can meet the requirements, meet your governance, security, your day-to-day business operations. And Jeremy, you said you have a background in development and coding. Do you want to talk briefly about kind of our low code, our app development, kind of how that's going to actually play into what we're doing and how it helps us from a business standpoint?
Definitely, because ultimately that's where it starts. Most enterprises have their platform, their back-end solutions with Oracle platforms and with Oracle SaaS or even on-prem appliances or services like within EBS or within our financial management tools. But there's a huge other part of the business that is not in one of those hosted solutions. It's developed by developers, run by engineers, managed by engineers, and it functions as a core, a lot of times product, a core engine. It feeds back on itself within a corporation, and it's a huge part of this ecosystem that is a cloud platform or a cloud services. And so we address that with OCI. You have your application development. We offer services that integrate well with your developers as far as storing code, storing artifacts securely, to go back to the security aspect, and then all the way into integrations to their IDEs so that you can have efficient development of those applications in the cloud. And then finally, one of the core aspects of infrastructure as code, or of cloud infrastructure, is infrastructure as code that goes directly into the core topics of the day, which is security and governance with cost management. With this infrastructure as code, you can develop and automate around security so you don't have quite so many hands touching things, that things are done systematically and under controlled conditions and are repeatable and auditable. So that touches the control. With cloud, with OCI in particular, you can scale the applications, your data management infrastructure, the whole gambit of tools. With your code and your automation, you can control cost, you can manage scaling so that you're only paying for what you need, instead of making large front-end purchases at the beginning of a product or a project, large purchases, when you're initializing or getting a lot of ideas off the ground. That ultimately is that agility, that benefit that you get with cloud first initiatives, with cloud adoption in general. And it feeds directly into all these other benefits, the integrations that you get with OCI from the application side to that. I'm going to start dropping products that we're going to start talking more about later, but with the autonomous data warehouse and with serverless, which have native integration and native hooks into the code suites, with our Apex platform, which is our kind of ingestion or platform for quick start applications, all natively integrate across the cloud and give you those benefits. So that's something I get passionate about. I love talking about the idea of just writing a line of code and seeing all this cool stuff happen without me having to call an ops engineer, or without having to make a request that I have to wait on. With these automation tools within OCI, your developers can efficiently, quickly write code and then see the results, react to that feedback, and keep your products moving forward, so you can spend time on products and features instead of waiting on operations or waiting on these manual interventions to happen. That's more associated with traditional data centers.
And this, and to your point, Jeremy, I mean, this is going to help us from our day-to-day business standpoint. Like this, all of these tools and everything we're talking about, from the low code, the app development, infrastructure as code, it speeds up our process. So it speeds up our process on the other side. So getting into some of these other tooling, I mean, we're able to have security from end to end when we're deploying this. We're able to see everything that's going on from end to end. And one of the core things for our talk is the security, the governance, and the budgeting. And so, if I'm going to build out something and I want Jeremy to be able to do a proof of concept, and for the business, this is something that we have to look at, say, for that proof of concept, we only have $1,000 budget. And this is something that we can actually go in and we can set those constraints, so that on that project that Jeremy's working on, he starts running through it. We'll get alerts, make sure, if we're getting to that threshold, to make sure that we're not going over budget for that project, or if we need to expand that, we can. And so from a standpoint of making it easy for Jeremy to just kind of go build what he needs to build, this is exciting. And to make it easy for the business to kind of say, hey, cool, we're good, we know what's going on. That's where we're going to kind of get into the account today. And I'm going to show you some of those things. So show you some of those methods to make sure we're doing it correctly at the beginning. So
exactly. And one of the big features there is you can see it with, like you mentioned, with the infrastructure as code, looking at Terraform, being able to see that in Resource Manager. There's business needs. You mentioned budget, you mentioned, those controls, and that's exactly what the business has been kind of begging for. And so they put in these controls through the feedback mechanism that is the OCI platform, with integrating with the tooling on the app side. The developers can get that feedback immediately. They can see the constructs that they have to work within and code to those. And then the business side can see the utilization numbers. They can see what is costing what. Another thing we'll speak about later is tagging, and how it works with not only just knowing where your stuff is, but also knowing what is your cost anchors. What is what apps are costing, what amount, so you can do your chargebacks, so you can do appropriate budgeting across organizations. So it really works both ways, like you were saying, and we're going to talk more about that.
Yeah. Well, let's, I want to get us into the next piece here, because I want to talk a little bit about, with being a business, some of the things we have to think about is the location of where we deploy our resources or our application based on our customer base. So Oracle Cloud Infrastructure has a variety of locations that we can deploy into. And Jeremy, do you want to briefly touch, like, what's our nomenclature here? Like, if I look at, let's say I look at the Bay Area or Phoenix, what am I getting when I actually deploy into one of those regions?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the biggest benefits of cloud is you're where your customers are, or you're where your users are. You don't have, with on-prem or colo, you would have to build data centers all over the planet, or buy rack space somewhere to get close to either your customers on the other coast, maybe even customers on the other side of the world. With the infrastructure that Oracle has, we can present your data to your customers as efficiently, low latency, and the other side of that is highly available and redundant as possible. So that if there is a failure, if there's an application failure, if there's an infrastructure failure, your data is backed up, your data is resilient, your application doesn't have to go down. So given that example, if you know we're in the Bay Area, we have our region, as we call it, and within that region, we have multiple, we call it availability zones, so that you have this different physical locations that actually host this data. But it all lives within your data center. For all intents and purposes, it's your data center, and built into it is this fully redundant, highly available infrastructure that just comes with the product. And then within, oh yeah, go ahead.
Yep. So sorry, not to jump in there, but I just wanted to break that down a little bit more and kind of progress forward, because we're, when we talk about the regions, like Jeremy's bringing up, these availability domains that were provided are crucial, and it's something that we're definitely going to dive deeper into these areas as we progress through this series. But it gives you the capability of having redundancy in your system. Now, when we talk about the failovers that Jeremy is bringing up and some of the places that we can actually expand to, some of these things are natively built out for Oracle Cloud. Some of them are going to require a little bit of lifting on as a customer to build these out. And so, it's not something to scare you, but this is something to kind of keep you apprised as, we have these ADs designed in a way that you can build out proper disaster recovery. So we can have region to region backup. And that's a matter of, like, if I want to go into a backup, I check a box and have it do a region replication. And we'll get in, if any of these terms are things that are kind of new to you, that's all right. We're here to, feel free to drop in the Q&A and we'll talk about those deeper. But really the core building blocks that we want to talk about here is the fact that we have multiple commercial regions, we have multiple government regions, and we also have this partnership, this connection with Microsoft Azure interconnects. So, Jeremy, this is something that you might touch on, like, from a business standpoint. How is this going to benefit me being able to link back up to, like, Azure? So if I'm deployed in one of these regions, I can link back to Azure. How does that kind of help me in growing my product and my solution?
I was just looking at that, and that's something that a lot of my customers that I'm working with directly use on the daily, to steal a term. Yeah, we realize that most enterprise customers, if not all, let's just say all enterprise customers, have a presence with Microsoft. They use AD for logging in, for keeping credentials, for email, for a lot of different things. And so we realize that our customers have data on Oracle and have maybe interactions, development, relationships with Azure. And so with really leaning into the needs of our customers, we've developed this relationship to connect Azure and our data centers, so that if you have Azure AD or you have an AD running in Azure, you can connect natively within the OCI ecosystem to your resources within OCI for authentication and for interactions, for storage, or for data being provided to applications provided in Azure for SharePoint or something of that nature. So it's something where, from a business standpoint, we have really leaned into those needs to say, you don't have to, we're not ripping you away from the tools that you've already paid for, tools that you're comfortable with, and those efficiencies that you've been around those tools. You can have your data at the quality and the scale that Oracle provides in OCI, and still have it natively speak to and privately and securely speak to your assets within Azure. And then you can connect those, again, as Larry was just saying, we have multiple connections across multiple regions with Azure, so that you can keep that high availability connection, you keep that high availability access across your applications, and still be close to your investment, close to your licensing, and close to your data, so that it's more efficient for your customers, your employees, and it doesn't disrupt your pipeline. It doesn't disrupt your flow for the day-to-day. And that's really the thought process behind it. Like I said, we listen to our customers and we meet those needs, because that's what was asked for, and so that's what was provided.
Yep. Yeah, and that gets us nicely into some of our next steps. I'm going to take a quick pause because there was a question. So, can an individual user select Singapore location? I couldn't find the region. So this is something that you can select this. So when you actually go into the console, I can show you, but you do have to basically request access to certain regions. So in the console, when you're first into it, you're probably going to see like 1 to 2 regions that you're actually able to access. And if you want access to other regions, you have to go in and basically click a button and say, hey, I want access to this region. Just, a word of caution when you do this: once you actually click that button and say, I want access to that region, you can't remove that access. So you will have access to that region forever in that account. So that's just something that if you're expanding to a new region, that can be done. That's beneficial, but it's something that if you do not need that region access, just kind of go through that and think about it before you click on the button. Because once you have access, then you have to think of some of the other security and other requirements that you need to put in place to make sure that you're limiting what's launched in those regions, or limiting the access of who can or cannot access those regions. All right. So one of my things I like to talk about when we talk about business and governance and just kind of building out in the cloud. So I know a lot of you said that you have experience with the cloud, have worked with the cloud. And so you're probably very familiar with this kind of shared responsibility model, or this kind of understanding of what's going on in a cloud. Because, I don't know about you, Jeremy, but I don't enjoy racking and stacking servers. And the cloud
had its day.
Yeah, I remember running low voltage. I remember all of that stuff for data centers when I first got into the industry. And so getting into this mindset of being able to push some of that responsibility to the cloud provider, I think is very beneficial as we kind of look from a business standpoint. But there's also things to think about. And one of the things that let me pop back to this slide. When we say we have commercial regions, gov regions, cloud at customer, multi-cloud, edge, all of these, and we get to shared responsibility model, there's going to be a wide range of this that we have to consider. And so when we kind of talk about this, on-prem portion, we have what's called cloud at customer or other things for your business that you can actually, deploy a full setup, a full data center that's still managed, and assisted by Oracle. And so it's something that you still don't have to do a lot of that heavy lifting in that case. So you're still just worried about, guest OS and up. And I would say that one of the things that I'll kind of draw a line here and go up, because when we talk about IaaS from kind of your business perspective, security, governance, understanding all of the aspects of this. And Jeremy, feel free to chime in if there are other points I'm missing. But when we talk about certain deployment options, you can actually control the hypervisor, essentially the virtualization that's going to happen at the infrastructure level. So this is something that this model here, when you talk about adjusting this level can adjust depending on the application that you're deploying. And so that would dictate what your requirements are for your company. What are your standpoints on what can or can't be done inside the account, or what can or can't be used when you're actually deploying.
Yeah, and that's really one of the amazing things about the offerings that OCI has that kind of separates it. Because you're right, these 4 categories are general and they apply to most of the offerings. But we have, the bare metal single tenancy offerings were exactly what you said. It's a box that's in the cloud that the customer has whole access to, and then they have full control over it from the virtualization level, all the way up to our functions, which goes a step beyond SaaS, where the only responsibility the customer has is the execution of that code and the code that runs it itself. So there's the whole spectrum within the cloud gives you that opportunity to say, I want this much control, and I want my cloud provider to do the rest of the heavy lifting. And that's a lot of it. And this is something, Larry, you and I talked about a little before this, is there's a lot of customers that have that want for control and have this idea that, I like having the boxes and touch the cables, but there's a lot of costs that go along with that a lot of customers don't realize. There's air conditioning and electricity and security, and there's building codes, and there's a lot of times with colos, there's noisy neighbors that might drop a line that cuts yours. That's may or may not have really happened. But there's a lot of things that when you push that off to the cloud, you're open to put those resources and that time into all the fun stuff, to the development, to the moving the numbers around, to open up budgets to be more aggressive with your products and services and offerings. So that's, as you go from left to right here, the more work you take off of your developers, off your ops team, off your managers, off your budget in general, you open that opportunity to really engage your customers at a different level, at a different speed, and build your business at cloud scale. And that sounds like a buzzword, and it is. It's the cloud scale allows you that opportunity to grow faster, bigger, faster, stronger as an organization.
I think Jeremy, going forward, we need a ticker every time one of us says a buzzword. It just pops up and says
put a dollar in a jar.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. So shared responsibility, something to consider, something to think about. So let's pop into security, and I'm going to get into Oracle security and the fact that we have this late. I'm even going to say it off the slide here. I don't normally like talking to slides or talking to a point on a slide, but layered cyber defenses, and this is something that I really think that is crucial. And you're going to hear me talk about security on every single one of these talks, because I think one of the biggest things to consider in the fact that Oracle, we have a lot of white papers on this, and we make sure that security is one of the biggest things that we consider when we start building out our applications and we start recommending how to build out applications. And security is crucial. It is something that there are multiple layers of security, and I'm not gonna go too deep at this point, but this is integrated security and services. And what we mean by this is when you go in and launch certain services, it's not a matter of is security on or off. When we talk about encryption and talk about certain aspects of security, it's a matter of, do you want Oracle to manage the keys, or are you managing the keys? When we talk about some of the other architectures that are possible here, we have white papers talking about how to deploy zero trust architectures. We have architectures in our architecture center that are validated to meet certain compliances, to make sure that when they're actually deployed, that you meet the security and compliance, and make sure that that's deployed correctly in a way that's beneficial to your company. Because you've probably all heard of it in the industry of things that happen because of security, misconfigured security. And so this is something that I really want to highlight early on when you're building out an account. And Jeremy, any points on here that you want to just pop into and briefly talk on before we go to database security real quick?
No, you hit it right there when you triggered me when you said misconfigured security, because I've had several customers that's really been bitten by that. And some of you may be out there, we were here for cost and ops and governance. Why are we here in the security talk? It's because it directly lends itself into it affects directly the business side of any organization if the security has not been well established from day one. So that's why this is week one of this talk, has security as kind of its front. Is everyone needs to be involved in that security conversation. You need to know what data needs to be under what compliances, what data has worldwide. You have sovereignty concerns. You have PHI and PII that a lot of times the development teams don't even have access to see, so they don't know what security or what compliances or what aspects of the data need to be focused on. So the business, you need to be aware that your financial data, your customer data, your analytical data has the right applied cyber defenses to it within this. This goes beyond all of that shared responsibility across the entire your entire ecosystem, and it needs to have a focus. Now, cloud makes it easy. I can go back to I say easy. Cloud makes it easier with the automation, with the auditability of coding your infrastructure and building it out and limiting those accesses. But it is something that everyone needs to be aware of in the conversation about going from day one, whether it's cloud or a hybrid model on-prem or cloud. And so that's something that why we're talking about this now.
Definitely, Jeremy. Like I think if I could get across one thing today, it would be security. Because I think once you have security down pat, then a lot of the other stuff kind of falls in place. But so briefly, database security, this is something that a lot of this stuff is going to be automated depending on the services you use. We have a lot of, patches are going to be taken care of. So this is one of the things I just wanted to briefly highlight. We have TDE, transport data encryption, when it comes to our database. So let's go ahead and hop over to our identity and access management, and we're going to dive into our core piece today. I know it took us a little bit to ramp up to this portion, but there were some crucial things I wanted to get across in kind of prepping for this overall series. So with identity and access management, this is some of the starts here. When we go into the account, when you first sign up for an account, this is where it starts. So you have to have users, groups, policies all implemented for this. And this is something that links up very nicely with something called IDCS for Oracle Cloud. And this is going to be beneficial when you actually set up your account, because when you progress your account from a governance standpoint, you're going to be doing things with certain policies that are actually maybe in Active Directory as opposed to inside of policies that are inside of Oracle Cloud. And so how do we actually get those policies implemented so I know what user is doing what at what time, and making sure that they have the access or lack of access for what they're implementing. And we can do this by having federation set up, and the requirement to have that set up is using IDCS. So we're going to kind of show that. Another crucial component, and I think Jeremy and I kind of talked about this, and we discussed why are compartments so important when we're setting this up, because it's setting up the boundaries. It's setting up clear delineation of what team is going to do what, or act upon what resources. And it also gives us budgeting capabilities, because from the business standpoint, again, this is something that I want to know what resources are costing me the most, or what resources or what project is costing me the most, and is it out of necessity? Or is this something that we're actually looking at the data and the monitoring and the alerting and all of the aspects of it to make sure that that project A is this instance the proper instance to be running here, or should we adjust the type of instance? And these are things that we need to kind of think about as we're deploying our compartment, deploying our account. So in the account that I'm going to pop into here in just a minute or two, because I really want to get in the console and show you some of that. I'll show you where the compartments are and what they look like. You can do multiple layers deep. There's also budget and quota boundaries on this. And that that is very crucial as we kind of progress through this. So Jeremy, I'm going to have you talk about this when we hop in the console. I just want to hop into tagging real quick, and then we're going to pop in the console and talk about these things a little bit more, so that we can have a little bit further discussion on that. So tagging is the other kind of important piece as we progress through this, because we can have tags that are predefined. And so if an individual goes into an account that has access, key here is the individual has access. I don't want to say, someone just hopped into your account. No, it's your developer that went into the account and they want to launch a resource. So we're defining tags that basically say, if that individual launches a resource, where's it being charged to? So we can have tags that are predefined that auto go onto the resource to say that this user created it, or we can have it set up to where cost attributes, cost tracking tags are implemented, so that we know where are we charging this back if we have chargebacks that need to be implemented. We can also set constraints, and set up core budgeting around tags. And this is something that is crucial when we first set up our account, because Jeremy, you feel free to chime in on this one, but something that I've seen across the board when I've gone into accounts, customers countlessly asking me all the time, like, how do I get budget on a project? And it's purely because tags were not implemented early in the process. And that is crucial, I think, to fill in all of the other items that we've talked about here.
Exactly. And I know I kick back to it a lot, but it is because it's my bread and butter. The best way to do this is through automation, so that developers don't even have to think about it, using OCI services like Resource Manager, so that it runs code tag. If a developer needs an instance, like your example, or if they want to spin up a database, those tags with the budgeting information, with the financial or the organizational information are attached to those resources, so that they can be traced back to who created them, why they were created, and then either in a system down the line, or in a spreadsheet, or however you keep up with it, you can see what was created, why it was created, and what the cost associated with that was. And then additionally, that ties right back to the security aspect. You can write security parameters around tagging for resources, and then it makes it that fine-grained razor blade to cut out what users, what systems need access to what other systems, and you do all that through tagging, and then that enables you to be more. The audit trail is a lot more easy to explain. The comfort level, the ability to sleep at night is a lot easier when you know that the system itself is monitoring itself, is policing itself through tagging of resources, and through that automation that ties it all together.
Yep, definitely. So there is a question in the Q&A. So the question is basically, more security training and understanding on what's being implemented. I do want to take this question as a follow-up, because this is something, and I'll make sure that everybody can kind of get the answer to this of other security trainings that we have that I would recommend to kind of go through what's set up in the account, so how to review that, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But we are going to actually have, in this series, we're going to have a security hour. So we're going to talk about security, how it's implemented on Oracle Cloud, and how to kind of go through that. So, but so we'll come back to this question. If you want to email us, feel free to shoot us an email as well on this, but we'll make sure that everybody gets the answers to this one. All right, so we're inside the account. Jeremy, have you seen this before?
I have. Yeah, it's there's a lot of nuances to it. I've seen it a bit, and I've been clicking around. I'm not as familiar with it as I should be. A lot of my time is spent in the console, but it is it's something that I'd appreciate a guided tour on.
Yeah, it's and let's take a guided tour. So one of the previous questions was asking about the region. So as you see here, like this is my home region. So Ashburn's my home region. But some of these other regions are just popping up in the dropdown. So you'll see, how do you choose this? And this is something to think about when we talk about compliance. Where are we building? Are we building in the correct region that we're allowed to, or where that data can actually be stored? So if we click on that, we can see what regions we're subscribed to here. And so I am not currently subscribed to some of these other ones. Like I'm not subscribed to Canada. And once you do this, just keep in mind, like I said, once you subscribe, you are subscribed to that region, which means that you're going to need to make sure and add. And if you're not seeing one of the regions that you're looking for, because I actually looking on this list now, I don't see the one in the question. This would be something I would need to reach out to support and find out why I'm not seeing it in my account. And there may be another step that I actually need to take. So if you're seeing a region that exists in our realms, as we call them, and you're not seeing it inside here, this would be something that we need to open a support case. And to open a support case on the account, what's great is I have this little help button, and we have, chat with us, visit support, post a question to our forums. This is going to pop in and say, how do I request limit increases, and learning more about regions and managing regions. So this is a great little icon here.
One thing I want to say about this that I really like, and like seeing this, is from personal experiences with customers a few years ago, the ability to have by default this huge swath of regions turned off lends itself directly to a big security question and also a big cost question. Because if you don't have the automation in place monitoring all of these other regions, and for some reason you have access, you have encroachment into your account fraudulently or maliciously, there's bots out there waiting for developers to release keys on GitHub. How this particular instance happened, where they spun up resources in a region on the other side of the planet that no other resources were on, and it wasn't within the scope of what was being monitored by that particular customer. And so they had the cost associated with all these resources running, and also the information, the access, and it really shed a light on, okay, how do we turn this off? And with OCI, by default, you only can create these resources in resources that you want and intend to create resources in. And unless you have this elevated administrator permissions, you can't turn these on. So that's one thing to consider. That's that safety net that OCI provides. We're not going to let someone sneak in the back door and start spinning up Bitcoin miners in the background in some obscure region that you're not just watching every day. This really steps in and protects you from that, just again from day one.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's okay. Just looking at the Q&A real quick. I'll answer that one in a second. So kind of looking at some of the other pieces here. So we have our announcements, and this is something that you can actually see when there was production issues with certain services or what's going on. You can have this email, or basically opt in or opt out of the emails, and this is nice to have to view what's going on. We have this Cloud Shell option. So if you're not familiar with installing CLI or just want to get started with some of that, we have the option of just clicking this and launching it. Language, and then we have this little profile icon. So this little profile icon, it basically is your card here. So this is something that's going to identify you. So speaking of that, let's pop into identity and access management. Now I can click through this and click to the profile. I can also go here and click on the navigation tree and go to identity and security. And we're kind of living in two places when we talk about business and operation governance. we have our governance here, which is something that we have our tenancy explorer, our quota policies, our limits, our tagging namespace, and domain management. And then we have our cost. For the starts of when we set up our account, we're going to be kind of in here, and we have a user that's in the admin group. And this is something that you'll see a fair amount of these. And this is where we have our compartments. And we can create multiple compartments in our account. So we can create a brand new compartment and have sub compartments with this. And when this says root compartment, this is actually the tenancy. This is when you first log into the account, you have this root compartment, and this isn't where we want to store things. We don't really want to store things in our root compartment aside from our identity and access management, some of our policy management. Everything else should actually be broken down into specific compartments that say networking or demo or training or something that is named for the resources that are going to be pooled into that compartment. And along with our federation piece. So this is something where you can set up federation. All right, so governance and administration portion. So let's pop over here. Because this is kind of the talks and really locking down kind of our account of what we can or can't launch. So we have our tenancy explorer, and this is something that I can see everything in the account, even if it's in different regions, and I can really drill down to what's going on. Our quota policies, and this is something that if I want to create a quota policy, I have two avenues to do this. I'm going to show you the quick way for now. This is something that I could show you the long division route, but let's talk about what do we actually need to launch. So if I select Ashburn 81, our availability domain 1, we have a lot of different resources. So I can launch cores for DVH standard 2.52 instances, and I can do 15,000 service limit. Currently, I've none launched, but if I go in here and look at my service limits, I can create a quota policy, and this gives me the prepped quota policy, and all I have to do in here is a number. So I just have to change this and type. Copy this, pop over to quota policies, create this, drop my policy in here, and change this number to 0. And now what this is going to do is inside of my account, doesn't matter what compartment, I cannot launch this particular resource. And so that, and then along with our tagging here, so I can do cost tracking, and then I can have my chargebacks of where this needs to go, cost center. I can have project code. These are things that I can kind of have as predefined. And when I actually create one of these policies, in this account, I can also have it where this tagging here will show, hey, this person created this at this time. And that's going to help from a budget perspective. And so getting into kind of the budget aspect of this.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking as I was looking through this, Larry, this is great. And I was wondering where it was that we could see it, where could we aggregate it? Because that would be the real useful part, is to be able to see how this is applied, how it benefits. Is it just something I know I've wanted for years, and I love seeing it in OCI.
Now, I like doing this when I set up accounts at any company for any vendor to really understand. Like, the first thing I want to understand is, how do I set up a budget? How do I set up how do I make sure that my project or what I'm doing doesn't I don't get that random $20,000 charge. It's no, we have it limited. We have budget. And so here's an example of one of our budgets that we set. So we have project -A, we have project, our monthly budget is 1,000, and, day of the month, it begins on the 1st. And so, we save this, and then we can create budget alerts. So we can actually have multiple budget alerts. I have to look at the specifics of how many alerts we can have for a budget. So I apologize, I don't have that off the top of my head. But we can do actual spend, forecasted spend. So if we do forecasted, this will, give us a theoretical of what we're potentially going to spend, and it could be, oh man, we're going to go way over budget. We probably need to adjust this. Percentage of budget, absolute amount. And then we have email recipients and email message. So this is something that we can send this to an email alias. We can also budgets help, and we can create an event for your budget. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this and see where this kind of takes us, because if I can create an event around my budget, to me, that's getting us into kind of the operational side of this. So I can create a rule around my budget, around budgets, and I can say alert rule created. And, as you can see, this is kind of helping me through this process. If I want to learn the JSON or get into that, I can start looking at that and view example events and pull that in. And then I can have actions of streaming, notifications, or functions. So let's say in this scenario, our company has decided that if this goes over $1,000, because this is testing, that we want everything shut off. Now that's kind of a torched earth scenario in this case, but it's something that if we don't want that running, and we're saying, hey, if this goes to over $1,000 or $10,000, we need to start shutting resources down to get our budget under control. We could have a function that evaluates and starts shutting things down that are not in use. Now that requires a little bit of coding. That's going to require me bringing in Jeremy and saying, hey, Jeremy, I need you to write a function for me. But this will help. And there are definitely functions out there that are going to help with some of this. But you see how easily this integrates with other services, so we can apply this correctly. So when we go here to our governance, we go to our cost management, and we create that budget. Now we can create a function or some sort of other item to really help with that. So I think we got about 4 minutes left here. So I just wanted to kind of open up for any other thoughts from Jeremy, and any other questions that anybody has. I know that Jeremy was hopping on the Q&A and answering some. So, but we want to keep this going. So this is something that we're going to be doing some more demos in our next series. We're going to be diving into other topic areas, and just kind of seeing what everybody feels about this kind of progression. So this is kind of day one. We kind of set up the account. We talked briefly about identity and access management, talked about budgeting. How do we put constraints on it? Looked at our quota policies briefly. These are all things that get us in the right direction to make sure that we are controlling what's going on with the tenancy, but also keep in mind that we don't want to lock this down so heavily that you can't progress forward. And that's where a lot of this stuff gets implemented in an easy manner, so that it makes it easy for you to progress, and essentially, get that project out the door as quickly as possible. Because we don't want to hinder progress on our developers or security teams in any team. We want to make sure that in this progress, that it's easy to do, so it's natural to do.
Yeah, exactly. And this, the budget aspect, the operational aspect isn't the most sexy way to introduce the cloud, but it's the most needed. It's the foundation, as the title suggests. And so it's something that it lays the groundwork for the ability to build amazing things within the constraints of which the business, in the direction the business wants to go. A company that really listens to the needs of the enterprise. And so that's some necessities that we've learned that need to exist. Budgeting, tagging, security constraints, all of those are built into the platform. The same way that you've grown to see them built into the SaaS products and the Oracle products across the board, is those needs in enterprise are addressed. That's something that a lot of other offerings don't have out of the box by default or as integrated as OCI does. And so that's something that we really wanted to hit day one. And then now we've got that laid out. Day two, let's start building.
Yep, definitely. Well, I'm going to hand this back over to Kenna, who has been a great host for us to let us present this topic today. So thank you, Kenna. And I think you have some other items you want to discuss before we close it out today.
Mostly just going to pop up one final poll for folks who are still with us. If you want to give that a look and rate the webinar and answer a couple questions, we always appreciate that. And just to give a really big thank you to both of you, Larry and Jeremy, for kicking us off. There's 5 more of these that we have planned kind of in that series, as you've been mentioning. So we will have replays of this up available to share with your friends and colleagues, and then many more series like this to come. So we can go more in depth on all of these future topics, which I'm excited to see how all that goes. So I hope that everyone can join us for more of these. The next one is in 2 weeks, 2 Tuesdays from now, and we will continue on through September with day 1 and beyond, how to get started. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Jeremy and Larry, for presenting, and we'll see you all next time.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you, everybody.
Yes. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We look forward to hopefully discussing this part 2 with you soon.